falling into a headfirst dive is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen. It gives me goosebumps every time he does it.
Welcome back to Does It Go Hard, the show where I review movies, video games, and more. Today is actually a special one because it is the first video game review of the channel. I've actually been postponing this for a while, and mainly it's because of time, but also because there's just been a lot of stuff coming out in terms of movies and TV shows that I just wanted to cover up first. Now that it's finally time to talk about a video game in the channel, a specific video game, I was thinking about which one to talk about. It's very special because I'm going to review somewhat of a, not necessarily recent, but is a somewhat technically next-gen game. And of course, if you've read the title of the video, you know that I'm going to be reviewing Spider-Man Miles Morales. Again, I know this is not a new game, but I really wanted to talk about it, especially since I got my PS5 during Christmas, and that was the only game I was able to play, especially because it was the most affordable at the time. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself and play some good old Spider-Man, especially based on probably one of my favorite versions of the character in recent years, which obviously Miles Morales. I love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Ever since that film, I've had this huge fascination and love for the character of Miles Morales and his stories. So definitely I was pretty excited when this was announced. But anyway, let's get into the review. So Spider-Man Miles Morales works more of a sequel to Spider-Man PS4, which is pretty obvious, while we wait for the actual sequel, which will feature both Spider-Man Peter Parker and Spider-Man Miles Morales. We have this right now. And let me just say right at the bat, I think Spider-Man Miles Morales is a pretty great game. Now, it's not perfect, and I do have some issues that I do want to talk about, but I do feel like this game handles some of the things that Spider-Man PS4 did in a better way. Mainly when it came to its side quests, I think Miles Morales definitely handles that a lot better than Spider-Man PS4, where I just felt like Spider-Man PS4 felt a little bit too cluttered with a lot of stuff, which is not bad. I love games that have a shit ton of content when it makes sense. Spider-Man PS4 always felt like it had a lot of content, but it never really found a good excuse to have that much content into the game. Like I said, a lot of the side missions were not very interesting. There's some hacking missions in the game, or hacking sections, where you have to solve these little puzzles that are kind of annoying. They're not terrible, they're not like hard or anything like that, they're super easy. But I was just kind of asking myself, why am I doing this? Like, this is not fun. As well as there's some stealth missions with Mary Jane and Miles Morales when he doesn't have his powers yet. And again, they're boring. They're missions that really feel out of place. Even in a story perspective, they feel like they shouldn't be in the game. I was definitely turned off by a lot of things in Spider-Man PS4, but I still like the game, don't get me wrong. Miles Morales fixes a lot of those things, and it fixes a lot of those things in many aspects. And one of the first positives I can say about the game is definitely the story. I found myself actually enjoying the story of Spider-Man Miles Morales a lot more than the story in Spider-Man PS4, mainly because the story in that game feels, again, like I said, it feels too cluttered because it's trying to shove in too many things into one game. And here's the thing, I have nothing against having the Sinister Six, that's definitely cool, but I think that if you want to do that, you kind of need to spread that a little bit more, and I feel like the game never really allowed itself to breathe and to really take in what was going on. Most of the time, the game was just throwing you things constantly, and it was, I guess the best way I can say that, it was very overwhelming most of the time. The story in that game is very complicated because it feels all over the place most of the time. The writing is not bad, but I feel like the pacing, and again, because there's so much in just one story, it doesn't let itself breathe and take its time to really process what's going on. And I think Miles Morales definitely fixes that. I feel like this is first of all, Miles Morales is a much shorter game, which is both a positive and a negative, and I'll get to that in shortly. But I do feel that the story does, the length of the story does work a little bit better in Miles Morales than it works in Spider-Man PS4, where even though the story is much shorter in this game, in the last game, the story felt very weak for me because, again, it had too much going on. It felt like, again, the developers were just kind of trying to put in as much stuff into the game just because, hey, well, people want a lot of content into the game, then let's just give them everything. And again, that's cool. I love a game that has a lot of content, but you need to find a good excuse in having that much content. And not only that, but you need to really make sure that your content is not going to get tedious or boring or really annoying, like, I don't know, halfway through the game. Because that's kind of how I felt about a lot of the side quests and side missions in Spider-Man PS4. A lot of them felt very unnecessary, and just, it made the game completely bloated with a lot of unnecessary content by the end. And Spider-Man Miles Morales actually finds a way to find a good balance between all the content. And again, this game also has a shit ton of content. Like, probably not as much as the Spider-Man from the PS4, but it still has like maybe like half or like a 50% of what the content was in Spider-Man PS4. Visually, the game is beautiful. It is extremely beautiful. I've seen some comparisons with the PS4 and the PS5 version of the game, and let me be completely honest, it's hard for me to sometimes find the differences between like these things, because I'm like, man, I don't care about graphics. Like, that's how I am, okay? I'm not somebody that necessarily cares about graphics. I'm somebody that cares about if the game is fun and if the game is enjoyable. The graphics, it's like, the graphics are a cool plus, but it's like, really, I don't need them. Like, there's a lot of amazing games out there that don't have like these super next gen incredible graphics. The graphics do not like reflect the quality of a game. Look at The Last of Us Part 2. Last of Us Part 2, gorgeous game. Gorgeous ass game. Like, incredibly beautiful game. But personally, I don't really like the game that much. I have a different look at that game, and I definitely would like to share some of it, but I just don't want to go so in-depth in it, because it's like, I don't want to bring up Last of Us Part 2 again, just because I feel like it's going to bring a lot of annoying people. Spider-Man Miles Morales on the PlayStation 5 looks absolutely gorgeous. I was looking at these cutscenes and the game in general, and I was like, oh my god, this is extremely beautiful. Like, I was seriously going like, holy shit, this is a pretty ass looking game. The gameplay is super fun. This is another thing that I think is better in this game than in Spider-Man PS4. Yes, the swinging and the web shooting and all that stuff is very fun, don't get me wrong. But I do get to a point in that game where I start to not get annoyed of it, but I do get tired of the gameplay. I become to really get used to it to the point where I'm like, yes, it's still cool, but it doesn't have that same oomph that it used to have when you first pick up the game. Miles Morales is different for me. I love his gameplay. It was really cool to see or to play as Miles being invisible and using the venom punches and all that stuff with the yellow lightning. Like, that stuff is, it's just great. I love it. That stuff was really fun. And again, going back to the story, Miles Morales does it better in my opinion, because again, it's a little bit more focused on Miles and his personal conflict with, well, not only himself, but also the people around him. It's really a much emotional story for me than the story in the last game. In Miles Morales, I feel that the story works better in many different ways, mainly because, again, it's very much restricted to being about Miles. I loved just how personal the story was with Miles and the people, again, the people around him. You know, not only his friends and family, but just in general, the people of Harlem. I think Harlem is quite a living, breathing character in this city. It's quite actually beautiful and impressive how much they actually give this part of New York such life. It was definitely magical to see. I know that I'm probably sounding kind of ridiculous right now how I'm saying this, but it really is. It's fascinating for me to see that they really found a way to make you care about Harlem and its people, and also his friends and family. It's really, really good. Very, very good emotionally. And the game ends on a high note emotionally as well. It even sometimes actually made me cry a little bit more than the ending of Spider-Man PS4. I really thought that the game really handled the story of Miles Morales very well, in my opinion. And you see me appreciating the game this much and just showing how passionate I'm feeling about it. And you might say that, well, man, then this game must be like incredible. This game definitely goes hard, right? Well, that's kind of the problem here, though. It doesn't always follow through with a lot of things. If there's one thing that unfortunately kind of carried away that kind of came from Spider-Man PS4 into Miles Morales, was definitely some of these nitpicks and some of these things that started to get a little bit on my nerves, especially when it came to the storytelling in some aspects, the gameplay being sometimes really obnoxious, and probably the worst part for me, and this is kind of a personal nitpick for me, and it's the price of the game. And that's where I want to start. My first negative is the price. Now, I will be honest, when I got the game, it was around Christmas, it was around the holidays, so it did have a holiday discount. Probably, I think it cost me like $40, maybe. That's how much it cost me. But even at $40, man, I was like, I feel that's still at the $40, $50 like dollar price tag. They're asking too much for so little, in my opinion. Again, I'm praising the game for being its own thing, and I'm praising the game for finding a way to balance the amount of content and the length of the story, which again, it's still good, but there are moments where you feel like, well, this could have been explored up a little bit better. Oh, I would have loved to see this in terms of side missions or side quests. That would have been cool. It also would have been cool if the game had more bosses. I know that I complained that Spider-Man PS4 had too many bosses, it had too many villains, and yes, that is still a complaint in that game, don't get me wrong. And the problem here is that the villains that this game has, really in my opinion, are very lackluster. Too much to the point where I'm like, this does not excuse like the lack of villains. Like, you fight Rhino at the beginning, he's like the first boss of the game, and again, he's literally the first thing you fight in the game. You fight Rhino, which again, cool, and it's a cool fight, it's a cool boss battle, don't get me wrong. But then later on in the game, you have to fight Rhino again, and it's like a little bit more challenging than the first time you fight Rhino, but still, it's kind of like, why am I fighting Rhino again? Like, this makes no fucking sense. And again, Rhino is also not, like, it's not my favorite villain as well, so it's like, why am I fighting this villain that I don't even like that much? And the rest of the villains, or at least the rest of the bosses, aren't very interesting. The boss battle with Prowler was more annoying than fun. The final boss fight is actually pretty creative. And it's actually my favorite boss fight of the entire game. I think it's probably the most effort they put into these boss fights. And there's also a secret, well, I don't want to say if it's a secret, but it's more of an extra boss fight with Vulture, which seems really out of place for some reason. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't imagine, like, Vulture being, like, a boss in this game. I don't know, like, I feel like a villain that would have made more sense would have been Electro. Like, that to me would have made more sense in Miles Morales as kind of an extra boss. But Vulture? That just seems like they didn't know what else to add, so they just kind of, just put Vulture in there. Yeah, I know it doesn't make any sense, but just put him in there. Like, dude, what? Come on, man. Like, it's weird. But I praise this game for the things that it does better than Spider-Man PS4, but at the same time, those same praises sometimes also kind of turn against each other, because you start to realize sometimes how annoying it is, especially when you paid like a good amount of money for what basically you could say is DLC for Spider-Man PS4. Like, again, this easily could have been DLC. Easily, I could have seen this as some extra DLC for the first game, and I would have been completely fine with this. But the fact that they made it they released it as its own, like, separate game, you do expect a little bit more from it. And I felt that by the end, I'm not gonna say that I felt robbed, because that's ridiculous, that's an over-exaggeration. But I did feel like, I think I paid more for, I paid more for something than what I got back, you know? Like, I felt like I paid more for less, if that makes any sense, you know? It's weird. I don't know if there's a better way to describe it, but that's just kind of how I feel right now. Especially right now that I was kind of replaying the game recently, and I was like, yeah, there's something about this game, especially like halfway through, I started to feel just how short the game was. I was like, am I seriously nearing the end this soon? I was legitimately surprised. I was like, whoa. I know I played this game like back in December, but I do not remember it being this short, man. And I do feel that it's a detriment to the game. I don't know. I probably sound crazy right now, especially after praising the game so much. My next negative is some aspects of the gameplay. Again, I praise the gameplay for being so much different from the one from the last game, definitely. But I do feel that sometimes the gameplay can be a little bit broken, especially when it comes to the AI. The AI, don't get me wrong, is very smart. And I love games that have smart AIs. There's nothing worse than playing a game where the AI is just completely fucking stupid. But there's also something very annoying about dealing with incredibly smart AIs. Especially when it came to stealth missions. Stealth missions were actually really fun. I liked playing stealth missions. I'm not a huge fan of stealth. But in Spider-Man, especially in Miles Morales, I think it really works well. The problem is that because the AI sometimes thinks it's a little bit smarter than it should be, you sometimes will get yourself trapped in these bullshit scenarios where there is no way the enemy could see you. Not even from a distance, not even from a point you are certain the enemy will not see me in this point. Yet the enemy still finds me some way. I don't fucking get it. Especially while I'm invisible. I know it's gonna sound really weird, or at least it's gonna sound really crazy, but there will be some times where I'm literally in my invisible mode. And somehow, it's not like I'm doing anything crazy, I'm not doing crazy shit to like get the attention of the enemy. I am literally like being as stealthy as I am. Like incredibly, meticulously stealthy. And somehow the motherfucker, a dude that's like not even near. Like it's a dude that it's like all the way like across the map or the area, or is behind something, like behind a box or behind a huge metal crate, and somehow they still will detect me. I don't know if it's a bug. I don't know if the AI is that it's just that smart that it can like completely know where I am at any moment. There's also these enemies that I feel that sometimes are a little bit overpowered. Now let me just say, when I play these games, I usually play them in a standard difficulty. I don't like to play them in easy mode because that's just too easy. I usually just like to play a balanced experience. Other than that, I think some enemies are really overpowered, even in normal difficulties. Like, oh my god, there are some enemies in this game where I literally felt that no matter what I did, I felt like I was getting my ass beat. It is kind of ridiculous sometimes how this game, especially near the end, out of nowhere likes to have a difficult spike. Like, it's like, dude, like, what the fuck? Like, this is, and it's not like a difficult spike where where it's like reasonable. It's more like Metroid Fusion. You know how in Metroid Fusion, like halfway through or like near the end of the game, there's this huge, crazy, like, difficulty spike out of nowhere, where it's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Game, you need to fucking calm down. Like, it's absolute chaos. And I sometimes felt that Miles Morales was like that. Not always, but there was moments of the game, again, like I said, near the end, but that's kind of obvious. Near the end, you do expect the challenge to get a little bit harder, so that's expected. But there are times, randomly during the game, where you'll fight just some generic thugs, and the thugs will either be the easiest shit, or the biggest pain in the fucking ass to deal with. I'm like, how? I feel like this game is not well balanced most of the time. And my final negative, again, this kind of has to do with the story. Now again, I also praise the story a lot. And again, I still stand by but a lot of the positive things I said about the story, definitely. But ooh, there's moments in the story in this game where I really felt like, okay, calm the fuck down, okay? There's technically two main villains in the game, but one of the main villains of the game is literally just a Elon Musk type company CEO, played by Troy Baker. And he is absolutely the most fucking generic villain I've seen in anything. He has no personality. He has nothing that makes him interesting. He's quite literally the blank slate of a generic CEO villain that literally does this because money. And I'm sorry, as much as Troy Baker is a good voice actor and a good actor in general, I don't feel he brings anything to elevate this character at all. I just felt like I was watching Troy Baker act like Troy Baker. There's nothing memorable about his performance or anything related to the character. The secondary villain is much cooler, but also, this villain is not very interesting, at least at the beginning. This villain is not very engaging. Maybe halfway through, you start to get a little bit more invested in the character, but still, it's man, these villains need to have more personality, or need a better moral code for me to at least understand their purpose. Now yes, unlike this CEO villain played by Troy Baker, at least the other main villain has an actual purpose. At least they actually have a motivation. But sometimes that motivation is very questionable, and especially to the extent it goes, you really start questioning, are you sure you still want to do this? Because even now, when Miles is telling you, hey, you are fucking up, you are going to cause so much fucking destruction, you have no idea, stop it. This motherfucker still is no, I'm gonna do it because It's like, why? Why are you doing this? And again, there's also some really messy stuff with the story. The Prowler is in the game, and I really don't feel like he's very well utilized. Again, I think the only moments when the Prowler is well utilized is, again, later on in the game. Again, once you fight him, I think that the Prowler does start to get interesting. But before that, you kind of start to wonder, what's the purpose of him being here? Other than, well, because it's a Miles Morales game, you have to obviously have the Prowler. And it's yeah, but you also need to have a good excuse to why he's here. It's ridiculous, man. And again, like I said, yes, halfway through the game, once you actually fight the Prowler, I do feel that he does start to actually get involved in the story and the game in general in a much better and more natural way. You can actually see how Miles and the Prowler's stories kind of interconnect halfway through the game. And I think that's actually cool. I actually do believe that they do a good job with that. There's another positive / negative. This is a hard one because this is a very much a mixed bag. I'm not gonna say, you know what? I'm not gonna say it's a positive nor negative. I'm just gonna say it's mixed. There's something really mixed about this game, and it's both the writing and the voice acting. This game has some flimsy writing, at least, I would say that it's a 50-50 when it comes to the writing. I think the writing is 50% really good and 50% kind of not bad, but really questionable, where you're I'm not sure about what the characters are saying in this moment, you know? The voice acting, is also very mixed. It's also very 50-50. Well, not really. It's not 50-50. It's more like everybody does an amazing job with their voice acting. But the guy playing Miles in the game, I really found his voice to be very annoying most of the time. And I'm sorry, I don't want to offend him. Like, he's probably a good kid, good sport. Like, keep doing what you're doing. Okay, don't let a stupid, like, fool like me, like put you down or anything like that. But I really felt like his voice didn't fully fit the character of Miles. Like, it felt like a prepubescent teen was voicing what it appeared to be like a 23 to 25-year-old guy, you know? It just didn't add up well to me, you know? And it's probably just me, it's probably just a me thing, but it did feel very out of place for me, sometimes his voice. And sometimes the delivery of his lines really were mixed with me. By the end, I do feel like his performance does get very good, but only near the end. Like, throughout the rest of the game, it's very mixed. He's either, he's kinda right to fuck, man. Again, you might say that the stuff that I'm saying is nitpicky, and it might be very nitpicky. Like, again, this is just kind of how I feel about the game and my experience with it. But don't get me wrong, okay? I still feel that this is a very, very much a great game. It's not a masterpiece, and it kind of upsets me, but it's still a great game. But I do see the potential of where this game could have been a little bit different and how it could have been even more elevated, where it could really been a masterpiece in my opinion. Mainly one of the things I feel that could have benefited from the game is if it wasn't really a sequel to Spider-Man PS4. If this was its separate game on its separate universe, I think this would have worked 10 times better. Especially if you do some really crazy like Spider-Verse stuff with the game. Like, I guess what I wanted this game to be by the end, I wanted it to be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the video game. I wanted a lot of the crazy shit that Spider-Verse did in this game. That including, you know, some of the more creative like abilities and powers. Again, they do a good job with that in the game here. But I feel that it would have been more creative if they would have done it more how they did it in the animated film. But also bringing in this multiversal rogues gallery of Spider-Man. Like, one of the things that really upset me about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is that we didn't get enough of that huge monstrous Green Goblin. I loved that character design for the Green Goblin, and he was like barely in the movie. Again, the movie's still amazing, it's still a 10 out of 10, it's still a masterpiece, but that was kind of one of those nitpicks where I was like, I wish we had more of that Green Goblin. I do feel that there was a missed opportunity of trying to make the game feel more like Spider-Verse, and again, that's probably on me, and again, I know it's a nitpick of mine, but either way, it's still something that I feel that would have elevated the game a little bit more if the game wasn't restricted to be part of this Spider universe in the PlayStation, you know? This game is both great. This game is both great, but it also has these shortcomings that I'm like, fuck, man, like, we were so close, this close to it. Really, I'm acting as if this was a bad game, but it's not. Again, it's a great game. But again, by the end, I really had a lot of fun. I enjoyed the game for what it was, and again, I'm more than excited for Spider-Man 2, okay? I'm excited to play with both Peter and Miles, and I'm excited to see Tony Todd Venom, and I'm just excited to see what crazy new shit they add to the Spider-Man. Like, will we have another Spider-Man character? I don't know, maybe Spider-Gwen? That could be really cool. I don't know, man. Anyway, what would be the final rating for Spider-Man Miles Morales? I really had to think about this one hard, because while this game does surpass Spider-Man PS4 in a lot of places, I feel that there was still very much space to improve. After really thinking about it, like quite a long actually, I had to really think about this one. By the end, I was like, you know what? Spider-Man Miles Morales doesn't go hard, but definitely goes raw. Again, like I said, the game has a lot of space for improvement, but definitely I can see them improving it incredibly easily. Like, I have complete faith in them that they are going to improve all of this, and Spider-Man 2 might be a masterpiece, might even go extremely hard. I don't know, it might go really hard. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was really fun to talk about a video game finally, or at least make a review on a video game. But anyways, what do you think of Spider-Man Miles Morales? Did you love the game? Did you hate the game? Tell me down in the comments what you thought about it, and tell me what you liked the most about it, or what you disliked the most about it. I really want to have a conversation about this game, you guys. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And as always, I'll see you in the next review, video, whatever. Take care.